Not jingoism, not telling foreigners to bugger off, which as was the case across the water.
I thought this was the silent chair.
Yeah. You expressed the hope earlier on that it was a silent chair, but anyway, go ahead.
I think...
Would you like to reply to Mary Lou?
Not really, but what I would like to say is that I thought I had reached an age where I wasn't shocked. But to see Peter Sutherland saying that we must find a way to rerun this referendum, or to see Tony Blair coming out saying it has to be rerun, actually has shocked me. I thought I was beyond shock. That's number one. Number two, like Anthony, I didn't think this Brexit was going to win. Certainly after the murder of Joe Cox, I didn't think. So I woke up to the result on Friday morning. I cannot believe what the establishment have done prior to the Brexit, during Brexit and after Brexit. I'm absolutely full of admiration for the English people who have stood up to a terrible bullying campaign. I would have no truck with anti-racism, nor the famous poster with refugees. I abhor it and I appall it. But to judge the 17 million people who voted for Brexit in that manner does the person who says that no service, and does the people no service. They stood up and said, we see the EU for what it is, or at least that's what I'm taking out of it. Is it the start of a new dawn? I do not think so. But I think it's the first step in exposing the EU. I thought it was exposed when we were forced to rerun the Nice Treaty. I thought it was exposed when we were forced to rerun the Lisbon Treaty. I thought it was exposed during the financial crisis. But unfortunately, the establishment, the politicians that were in power, plus the media by and large, helped to stop that exposure. I think it's exposed again now, and I think it's open for us to grab that opportunity and not let the right have the narrative or tell the story. It's up to us to grasp it. How could you possibly say that the EU is good as it stands when we have a country where we have to get permission to build homes for our people? That came out recently on the committee, that we have to get permission to fiddle with the fiscal treaty to get money. How can we possibly say that this EU is a social EU that allows 10,000 minors, unaccompanied minors, go missing in Europe? And we haven't had one single urgent debate at EU level in relation to that. On top of that, we have the Lisbon Treaty, and I'm all for a social Europe. I'm all for Europe. However, the Lisbon Treaty, which I canvassed against, and I canvassed against after reading it in detail, I would hope that there was scope in that treaty to bring out social Europe. But I'm afraid the emphasis is on the militarisation of Europe, page after page, and we made this point at the time. It's in relation to the neoliberal agenda, page after page, in relation to freeing up the markets. There are good articles in it, like the one I quoted in the Dáil today, that all democratic decisions should be made as near as possible to the citizen. That's the dream. The reality is we have taken power repeatedly from local politicians, just as one example. So I would love if somebody took this away better, that was able to study it better than me, and show us the way forward to bring out the social Europe. But I think it's dominated by clauses that are neoliberal agenda and dominated by the militarisation of Europe.
Okay, we're going to take a break. After the break, we'll get Owen Murphy to reply. Join us then.
It's not to say that it's a perfect union. It's not to say that it doesn't need to be improved. But that's the whole process of continuing to engage.
Would it not worry you, the language that has come from the so-called leaders in Europe, telling England if they're getting out to get out?
I think that's a mistake on their part.
I think
would
it worry you that the...
I think that's reasonable enough, because there's uncertainty now about again, it's the convenience of the Tory party that they're going to defer the appointment of a new Prime Minister
There's nothing wrong with that under Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty. There is no time limit
but Catherine,
for
just
making the announcement.
That there's a reasonable apprehension on the part of people in Europe who remain in Europe and the EU that insofar as possible the present uncertainty be dissolved insofar as possible, and that so long as Britain delays acting on Article 50 and arranging for its exit, the uncertainty will remain. And I think it's a reasonable apprehension.
Uncertainty is part of it. There's no escaping that. Article 50 provides framework. That's why it's in there, to provide a framework to allow somebody. But one has to ask, why is there such a doomsday scenario in relation to a country leaving?
To deal with the problem of uncertainty.
No, Vincent, the question is, if the article was put in specially to allow any country to leave, how could the triggering of that article create a doomsday scenario from all the commentators and the establishment?
Well,
I suppose it's because it's
I didn't call it. Sorry, I didn't call it that. That is the language that has been used. I have actually referred to it today in the Dawn. I meticulously went through the newspapers, the commentators, and listened to the radio programmes, and repeatedly it was characterised.
What commentators do you have in mind?
I beg your pardon?
What commentators do you have in mind?
Well, I'll go through them if you like. One of them.
Go through them.
Would you like that? Certainly go through them one after another. I'd be delighted. Cliff Taylor, the overwhelming opinion of analysis is that the balance for the Irish economy will be negative. The only question is how much. Fintan O'Toole, recklessly and casually, with barely a thought, English nationalists have planted a bomb under the agreement that brought peace to Northern Ireland. Another commentator, journalist, so the nightmare has actually happened. Pat Cox, ex-president of the European Parliament, mines going off, he said. Hidden mines that people will walk on when they will explode and people will not be expecting them. Micheál Martin, when he was interviewed, bad for Britain, bad for Ireland, bad for the world, and so on and so on.
But that's a reasonable point of view.
I don't think so. This is a treaty that we were forced to run twice. And in that treaty is Article 50 that allows for any country to make an application
to
exit.
But it's reasonable to say that this is bad for Ireland because of our reliance on the British economy. There's going to be there's going to be a downturn in the British economy, which will have effects in Ireland. So it's reasonable to say bad for Britain, bad for Ireland, and bad for the EU because of the uncertainty it's caused in the EU.
It's not necessarily bad for Britain whatsoever. It's a very strong economy. We don't know what's going to happen with Britain. Certainly, there are serious implications for Ireland that Eugene started to outline that we need to look at. But the more important thing is, if you put an article into a treaty and then somebody triggers that, it shouldn't trigger a doomsday scenario. It should trigger an orderly exit. It shouldn't be something that we're going to have to rerun because they didn't give the right answer. And Eugene has accused me of giving a simplistic narrative. I've done anything but the sort. I would hope that this Brexit is a push for us to look at what the EU has become.